From Faith Forward Media, this is Healthcare Musings. I'm Dr. Hassaballa. Welcome everybody to Healthcare Musings. Happy to have you here. All right, so in the next 1 to 2 episodes, we're going to talk about sleep in the intensive care unit. Now, everybody knows when you're sick, right? The best thing you can do is to get good rest and sleep. You treat your symptoms. You take acetaminophen or ibuprofen for fever and body aches and stuff like that. And a lot of people sleep a lot, right? The body needs rest. It needs to focus on fighting the infection, whether it's viral or bacterial. And it's so interesting that when you're in the hospital, the place of healing, the place where you're supposed to go to get healed from illness, and sometimes critical illness, which is where I come in, it's so interesting that sleep is the last thing that patients get. We are waking them up at all times of day and night to do assessments and get vital signs and give medications and poke them for blood tests. We are disturbing their sleep to get imaging studies. In the intensive care unit, God forbid that you get admitted to the ICU for example, after a stroke or something like that. God forbid. We're checking neurologic checks every hour. So we're doing a neurologic assessment every single hour. I don't think it's bad. I don't disagree with it. I mean, we have to make sure that we're not missing subtle neurologic changes, especially if we give medications such as TNK, which is a clot busting drug, and it can cause devastating and life-threatening bleeding in the brain and other places. And so we have to make sure we don't miss subtle neurologic changes. And so 100%, we need to keep waking you up every hour and disturbing your sleep every hour to make sure that we don't miss these subtle neurologic changes. The problem with sleep deprivation is that it's very bad for you. I mean, a torture technique, and I'm not saying we're torturing patients, a torture technique in these notorious prisons is sleep deprivation, where people just keep you awake. And it's very bad. I mean, there's so much research, there's so much studies and learning out there that has shown the deleterious effects of sleep deprivation. In fact, I got into a Twitter battle a couple of years back about daylight savings. The whole reason why there's an increase in car accidents and things when we go from a standard time to daylight savings time is the sleep deprivation, is that people lose an hour of sleep, right? So there's just so many bad things that come with sleep deprivation. And I just want to kind of go over that fact that the patients who come into the hospital, especially the ICU, they don't sleep well, and it has bad outcome. I mean, it has bad things. It can cause delirium. It can cause hallucinations. In medical school, when I was sleep deprived, I would have auditory hallucinations. I would hear people screaming when I was sleeping. It's because I'm trying, the brain is trying to make up for the REM sleep that was lost. So sleep deprivation is bad, and unfortunately, in the hospital, many patients get sleep deprived. Me too. I had thyroid surgery for my thyroid cancer, and I barely could sleep. Barely. And thank God I wasn't in the intensive care unit. I was in regular routine overnight stay, and I lost a ton of sleep. And so I just wanted to kind of go over kind of the classic research on sleep deprivation. So these are studies. It was published in the journal Sleep in 1989. I believe it was out of the University of Chicago. And what they did is such an interesting setup. So rats hate water. Okay, and so what they did is they had a control rat and they had a experimental rat, and they put on one round disc over water, and they had as much food and water that they can have, and their brains were hooked up to EEG. In the experimental rat, whenever the experimental rat would fall asleep or go into a sleep stage that was not allowed, the disc would start rotating. And if the rat did not keep walking with the disc, it would fall in the water, and they hate water. And so that's how they kept these rats awake. The control rat, when the disc is not moving, can sleep as much as it wants. And that's how they compared. So what they did was they said, okay, what happens if you completely sleep deprive the rat, right? Using this disc over water method. Okay, so they did total sleep deprivation in the control rat, and I'm reading from the abstract of the study. This was published again in this journal Sleep in 1989, and I remember learning about this when I was studying for my sleep boards, because I am a board certified sleep specialist. So all of the total sleep deprived rats died or were sacrificed when death seemed imminent within 11 to 32 days. And they said there's no anatomical cause of death that was identified. All of the total sleep deprived rats showed a debilitated appearance, lesions on their tails and paws, and weight loss despite increased food intake. And the control rats remained healthy. So within a month, if you completely sleep deprive the rat in this experiment, they died. So then they said, okay, let's not totally sleep deprive the rat. Let's deprive the rat of, now back then it was called paradoxical sleep. Now it's called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. This is the quote unquote dreaming sleep. Okay, so they say, okay, now let's deprive them of REM sleep. What happens? All of the REM sleep-deprived rats died or were sacrificed when death seemed imminent. Now, it took them longer to die, 16 to 54 days. And again, all of those rats showed a debilitated appearance. They had lesions on their tails and paws, and they had weight loss in spite of increased food intake. So, not only does total sleep deprivation kill you, REM sleep deprivation kills you. Then they did, okay, now let's deprive them of high amplitude EEG sleep, high EEG amplitude sleep. Let's deprive them of that portion of non-REM sleep with high EEG amplitude. If I'm not mistaken, and I might be, that could be slow wave sleep. Right, because it's very high. It's slow frequency, but it's not that high frequency, but very high amplitude. So those rats died. It took them longer, 23 to 66 days. They had the same thing: debilitated appearance, lesions on their tails and paws, and weight loss, despite increased food intake. In fact, energy expenditure increased to more than twice the baseline levels, right? And so you can't do this to humans, obviously, although torture chambers do this all the time. And there is a reason. Sleep deprivation is super bad. It's super bad for you. And so what is now? We can talk later, and I might save this for another episode. We can talk later about sleep in the intensive care unit, because there are guideline recommendations in the latest Society of Critical Care Medicine guidelines about sleep in the intensive care unit that will go over in detail, and things that we can do that I recommend we should do, and that I want to do in my ICU to promote good sleep for patients. We'll go over that in another episode. But in general, you cannot skimp on your sleep. It's very easy to, sleep is 7 to 8 hours. As a sleep specialist, most adults should get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And some people can do fine with 6 hours of sleep a night. Others cannot function without sleeping 9 or 10 hours. Those are on the edge of the normal distribution, on the edges of the normal distribution. Most people need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That's 7, 8 hours out of your day. There's so many things going on. We're so busy. We got this and we got that, and we're working. There are people that work night shifts. I work night shifts. When you sacrifice your sleep, it's not good for long-term health. They've shown that. They've shown about the health consequences of shift workers and night shift workers. There's research about that. It's interesting when I was studying for my boards that when you're sleep deprived, and this is so true in me, you crave carbs. You tend to crave carbs over protein, especially simple carbs, and that leads to weight gain if you continue. So think about it, if we have a chronically sleep deprived society and we're always reaching for those simple carbs, right? The candy, the sugar, the chocolate, the pretzels, because sometimes we can't help it. It's maybe there. Of course, there's a whole. I'm not going to even get into that right now, but maybe that there's some role for sleep deprivation in someone who is constantly craving and reaching for simple carbs. I think the way they do it makes you want more. It's not satiating and it makes you more hungry. At the same time, there may be a role for chronic sleep deprivation in that you're craving for simple carbs, and there's cardiovascular consequences and mental health consequences. Foregoing sleep is never a good idea. You have to focus. And as I've gotten older, I've even doubled down on as much as I can. Without, obviously, when I'm working a night shift, that doesn't happen, right? I need to be awake for my patients. At the same time, I do what I can to get as much sleep as possible because it's so important, especially as we age, but even when we're young. Don't skimp on your sleep. It's not good for you. And it kills when they totally sleep deprive rats. They died. When you REM sleep deprive rats, they died. When you deprive them of high amplitude sleep, which I think is slow wave sleep, they die. It's not a good thing to skimp on your sleep. Don't do it. Thanks so much, guys, for your time and attention. And until next time, this is Hassaballa signing off on Healthcare Musings. Thank you for listening. Sign up at healthcaremusings.com to get every episode delivered directly to your email. And please don't forget to leave a 5-star review. Thank you so much.